This is the first video in a series of videos related to our paper that is published in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis called A Primer for Using Multilevel Models to Meta-Analyze Single-Case Design Data with A/B Phases. In this first video, I'm going to show you the initial setup steps to conduct this multi-level model using SPSS. And I am using version 26 of SPSS on a Mac. The steps are pretty similar, though, in all versions of SPSS and should also be similar on a PC operating system. Java subscribers can also download the datasets that we're using in this tutorial from the Java website. It's available as supporting information. So you can actually follow along using the actual dataset that we're using here. All right, so I'm going to go over how to import a dataset from Excel into SPSS and then how to prepare the data file for analysis by selecting certain cases and also splitting the file. Okay, to start off, I'm going to open up our file. I have our data in an Excel file. For our meta-analysis, we were interested in looking at studies that used a procedure called differential reinforcement of low-rate behavior, and I'll call those DRL schedules. So we were interested in looking at DRL schedules, and there's broadly two types of DRL schedules that we wanted to compare to see how they changed behavior relative to a baseline condition. And if you're following along with this data file, which again is available from the Java website, we are using the tab called Raw Session Data. So the blue tab down here at the bottom, which is what it opened up to. Some important things about the way this is structured and what the variables are. So we'll use those in SPSS. This first column, labeled study, is a study number. We assigned each article or study with a number. And then we also assigned each participant within a study or each data set within a study with a number. And then we combine those two things to create a unique identifier. So the identifier for study 1, participant 1 was 0101. And I'll just scroll down. We use this basic formula for everyone, but I just want to show you one further down. So let's go to study 27, data set number 5. So that unique identifier for them would be 2705. Okay, the other thing I wanted to point out to you right now about this is over here on the right-hand side, column L. This is labeled as DRL, and this is where we specified what type of DRL schedule each participant was actually using. For study 1, participant 1, their DRL type was a 2, and a 2 was coded as a full session DRL. And then we coded 1 as a spaced responding DRL. So study 2, participant 1, or 0201, they got a spaced responding DRL. So that's what those numbers mean over there. So for our purposes, we analyzed the two types of DRL schedules separately because in some studies, participants could experience both types of DRL schedules. So to make a kind of long and complicated story short, this violates an assumption of the analysis. In really simple terms, the analysis assumes that when we're comparing an intervention of some sort, like the DRL, to a baseline, that each intervention is compared to its own baseline. But for these participants that experience both types, they typically had one baseline and then a comparison of the two different types of DRL schedules. So that baseline, it wasn't independent across those two DRL conditions. So for that reason, we ran the analysis separately. And to do that, we first had to split the file. So I'm going to do that now because if you're following along using the same data set, you'll be working with the same data that I'm working with. However, for a lot of cases and data sets, this might not be an issue if you're only looking at one type of intervention, for example. Or if no one experiences two different types of interventions, then this wouldn't apply and you can just skip right over this step. Okay, so I will talk about some of the other important columns from this spreadsheet, like the X and Y values and exactly what those all mean in later videos in this series. But for now, that's all we really need from this spreadsheet, or we need to be on the same page about from this spreadsheet. So we can open up SPSS. And when you open SPSS, you'll have this box pop up about creating a new data set, or you can open up a file. My file actually shows up in the recent files here, but I'm going to show you how to open it. So you click open another file and then open. My file is located on the desktop, which is where this folder opened up to, but nothing is showing up here. That's because SPSS is looking for an SPSS file, and I saved my file as an Excel file. But we can easily open that up. So just switch this over to Excel data, and then now my data file shows up. So I click on that and I can say open. And then it asks me a couple questions about my data file so it knows how to read it. So first I need to tell it which worksheet I want it to actually read. And the worksheet I want to read is the tab, so the raw session data tab that I had showed you already. So I'll select that. I don't need to specify anything here in the range. This is just if you only want it to read a portion of the data range, but I want it to read everything. And all the default values here should be fine. Just make sure, especially that this first one, read variable names from first row of data. Make sure that's checked. And otherwise you can hit OK. Okay, so here is our data set. All right, so now we have our file open. And I just want to show you real quick, we can open the file by going to File, Open as well. So if you don't come up with that dialog box, if you're in SPSS, you can go to File, Open, and then select Data, and it'll bring you to that same box that we just went through. All right, so now it's time to set up the file. The first thing we're going to do is select only the cases that used a spaced responding DRL, or only the sessions for the cases that use a spaced responding DRL. So I'm going to go to Data, and then move down to Select Cases. And then what we want to do is set up a condition that tells SPSS which cases we want to include. So we're going to go if condition is satisfied, and then select if. And here's where we specify what our conditions are. So we want the spaced responding DRL, and then we go to DRL. So just move that over to the box. DRL equals 1, because spaced responding DRL is a value of 1. And then we can hit continue and OK. And now it's complete. So you'll immediately notice when you do select cases that SPSS will put this diagonal line through the rows that it's no longer including. So it's no longer including anything where a DRL is equal to 2. And if you scroll down, you'll see, all right, so like starting with number 80, this is in study 2, participant 1. They used a spaced responding DRL. So those don't have the line through it. So it'll go through and do that for anyone that doesn't have a 1 for the DRL value. All right, so that was the first thing we needed to do. And again, we needed to do that because when we run the analysis, we're doing it separately for the spaced responding DRL and full session DRL. So all the steps that I described here, when we go to run the analysis for the full session DRL, we'll do the exact same thing, but we'll just say DRL equals 2. Now the next thing that we need to do is split the file. Split file makes all of the analyses that we run give separate results for whatever we split the file by. So we want to split the file by the unique identifier. So this like 201 is our unique identifier, study 2, participant 1. And this allows all the output, the results that we get, to be grouped based on that participant number, that very unique participant number. Because ultimately what we're doing in SPSS, and I'll show you how to do this in the next video, is actually trying to get an effect size estimate for each of our participants. So what is the effect of the DRL relative to baseline? What is the change in behavior going to that new condition? So we need to do that separately for each participant. So that's why we need to split the file. So again, we go to Data, and then there, right above Select Cases, there's a Split File option. So select that. The default setting is to analyze all cases, so not organizing or splitting it by groups, but we want to split it by groups. The other two options do split it up. They just kind of organize the output in different ways. I'm going to go with compare groups just because of the way that this organizes the output makes it a little bit easier for us to work with and copy and paste into our Excel spreadsheet. So I select the compare groups option, and then I need to tell it what I want to split it by. So identifier is the name of the variable that we want to split it by. So you move that over to this dialog box and hit OK. All right, so that's done. And now we have split the file and also selected out only the spaced responding DRL cases. So that's all we need to do to really set up the file. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to run the actual regression for each data set. The regression is what we do to actually get those effect sizes that I mentioned before for each participant. All right, so that's it.